What was the biggest bullet you dodged? A few years ago I had pneumonia, but my whole family insisted that it was just postnasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the ER, the doctor said that it was the worst he'd ever seen, and he was surprised I wasn't dead. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs and another 2 weeks in the hospital siphoning out the rest. For 3 months afterwards I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out, and I still can't run for more than 200 to 300 yards without collapsing. Many years ago, my flight had just landed at Chicago O'Hare and the plane was taxiing when the pilot suddenly slammed on the brakes. People were literally thrown forward against the seat in front of them. A few seconds later, another plane taking off I think went screaming by right in front of us. No explanation was given, though our imaginations provided a lot of gory details. Just regular Chicago drivers. Around 30. 0 pounds. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening, and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rearview mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane, and less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything, but 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. As a kid, after running errands in town with my mom, I was climbing into the back seat of our family station wagon. A semi-truck hits a power line pole down the street, causing the still live wire to fall, bounce off the roof of the car and hang across the open door just a foot or two above my legs. Raised Catholic, I wondered for a while after if I had actually died that day and that the rest of what I thought was my life was my purgatory. My dad was a truck driver in the oil field in Canada. He worked a lot of long hours and every single day. So on weekends he would bring me and my younger brother on some of his jobs. We were on location and my little brother 3 years and me 10 years were waiting for him playing in cab of truck. My little brother opened the passenger door and my little arms closed it. Job's done. We start our trek home going about 35 km/h and the door flies open and I get sucked out of truck. I remember doing about 10 backflips as I tumbled out, hitting the ground on my back a few times and rolling my way to a stop. I stood up before the truck was even stopped in absolute shock. Next thing I see my dad looking for me and he burst into tears. First time I ever seen him cry. I'm 33 now and he still won't talk to me about it. Luckily the rig was in a farmer's field, so when we were leaving I landed on softer dirt. Not a single scratch on me. Dad thought he ran over me with trailer. Don't think we ever went to work with dad again. I work for the company now. Not changing jobs in early 2020. Would have been a short-lived promotion after early restructuring and layoffs. I changed jobs March 9th, 2020. 2 days later my city shut down and everyone was sent to work from home. My new company committed to zero covered layoffs. The company I left laid off about 80% of my department. Dodged a bullet, haha. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you 50 if you do. The check is 500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. After I had a stroke, I was in a coma and it didn't look like I'd wake up. The doctors asked my wife if they should let me go. I only exist because she said no. I didn't dodge a bullet so much as my wife blocked it for me. Honestly, this made me tear up a little. Please tell your wife that she's incredible. My aunt did something similar. She saved her husband from a heart attack by using her nursing experience and network to get him on the table before it even started. To this day even doctors have no idea what caused his heart attack. But my aunt and your wife are legit superheroes. Not me. But I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open, while he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin, the machine would execute the queued instructions and start moving. And he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. Was going to move to a different apartment complex, last injured at work and lost hours. Therefore, couldn't come up with the deposit money in time. Last week some Ashad was cooking meth and caught the building on fire. Undefined. My newborn needed to be rushed to a super high level NICU to be put into a state of induced hypothermia because he only had hours before he would suffer permanent brain damage. I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. The small town next door just barely upgraded their hospital to have that hypothermia suite, one of only a few in Texas. He's doing great. No sign of any damage. I stayed up all night before a day trip to Hong Kong. You know that days when you haven't slept. You're just kinda robotic and doing the human stuff. Nearly zero awareness of anything. Well, I went across the street and my friend behind me snatched my shoulder and yanked me backwards just in time to feel the whoosh of a double-decker bus breezing past us. I just looked at him like, oh, thanks man, and it took a whole extra minute for my brain to process I would be peep and dead had he not grabbed me. I can answer this in a literal way. When I was a child, I was playing video games with my little brother. Well, he found our dad's gun and fired it. No one was hurt, but it scared the speep out of me. I survived a rocket attack that landed about 10 meters from me, very close to where we were standing. We were so close to the launch site that the warning alarm came after the rocket had already impacted. Thankfully, we were able to dive under a vehicle for some shelter and the three of us made it through unscathed. There was a pile of stuff that people would leave at our house when I was at university. Coats and stuff. Moving out day, and we found a random samurai sword in the pile. We were messing about with it trying to make it go swoosh. I was stood facing my brother while he was swooshing it when the blade dislodged from the handle, flew straight past me and stuck horizontally into my headboard. So yeah, my brother nearly impaled me while messing around with a random sword we found after a house party. Pics for proof. When my great aunt passed away, I was helping to clean out her house. I'm just dragging everything out of the basement and suddenly my dad is like, whoa, put that down gently and let's move away from here. So I put the weird metal tube type thing I'm carrying down and get out of there. Turns out it's a mortar shell from when my aunt worked in a munitions factory during WWII. Bomb squad came and took it away. I interviewed for a job that I wanted desperately in August 2019. After the initial phone interview, I went in for an in-person interview at 4 PM on a Wednesday. I had a rejection in my inbox by 8 PM and was completely gutted. Then 2020 happened, and they laid off 60% of their staff and will probably go under. I'm thankful for that rejection every day. Had a teacher in high school who was wicked sarcastic and witty, while also being a hard-ass grader. To me, the perfect teacher. Class was challenging, but we were all laughing and having a good time. He was a great mentor and I continued to visit his class even after I graduated. One time, post-graduation, I was sitting in his office, and I had just given him some art to decorate his classroom with, and he was so excited he blurted, "I could kiss you." Something about the intense eye contact unsettled me, but I laughed it off. 17y/a girl. What can I say? Couple months later, he was arrested for having a sexual relationship with an underage student. My mother left me in one state and went back to my abusive stepfather. She tried to get me to drop out of my senior year at HS, move back to their state and just get my jet. They wanted a live-in babysitter, cook and maid. I was so lucky my grandparents let me move in with them and finish school. Undefined. For those who have asked, I'm doing great. I've gone no contact with my mother and stepfather. They're still together, and it's been one of the most healthy decisions I've made. My husband and my kids are amazing, and she's missing out big time. My grandparents are alive and well, and are still involved in our lives. Freshman year of college I had a calc class. It was material I had learned before, but for various reasons they didn't give me transfer credit. So I skipped class quite frequently, though I usually slept in. One morning I find myself awake at 8:30 and not really feeling like sleep. Might as well check in on the class and see what's going on. It was the midterm exam. Getting chased by someone with a knife across my apartment. I closed my door at the right moment, so that person ended up stabbing my wooden door instead. The mark was there until I left the apartment a few years later as a constant reminder of what could have been. Not my story, but a girl I knew had had a few drinks and decided to hitchhike home. A town about 40 minutes away from the one she'd been drinking in. Note it is very common for people to hitchhike in this area. She gets picked up by a car of guys. All seems fine until she points out they can drop her off just up ahead, and they keep driving. She had that instant sober feeling. She plays it off like she's clueless and totally down to keep hanging out with them, acting like she's very drunk. Meanwhile they're back in more forested area of the highway. Then she fake dry heaves and says she about to puke, really putting on a show, so they stop to let her out. She books it into the bushes and just doesn't look back until she's safe. Undefined. From what I'm aware of, no charges were ever pressed. By the time she made it to safety they would have been long gone, and she had no info like names, license plate or anything. Yes, smart idea once in that situation. Definitely not smart to be in that situation in the first place though. When I was in middle school I wanted to buy a fedora, but none could fit my head. Euphoric. In 1992 I was 16. A bunch of us were about to leave a party and I called shotgun. But my friend Pat kind of wrestled me out of the spot and I wound up jumping in another car, since the first car was now full. The other driver and I watched as our friend's car skidded into oncoming traffic. Pat was airlifted to the local trauma hospital where his dad told a huge group of us teenagers that Pat had succumbed to his injuries. Maybe that's not exactly bullet dodged, but undefined. Pat's driver and my driver were racing each other. The road had just been paved, and the shoulder was loose gravel. So when Pat's driver applied their brakes when the passenger side of the car was over the line on the right side of the 2-lane, the passenger tires kept spinning, while the driver's side locked up, spinning the car into an oncoming pickup. The oncoming driver was hospitalized and recovered. Pat's driver broke a femur, was convicted of vehicular manslaughter, sentenced to home detention, but was late to get home from high school one day, which tripped the ankle monitor and the driver did 30 days. The 3 kids in the back had to be extracted by the jaws of life, broke some bones, got an insurance settlement. However, I don't think I would have died if I got shotgun. We would have left 15 seconds earlier and we wouldn't have hit that oncoming pickup. Or maybe we would have. At 17Y/0 I met and married a sweet little North Carolina daddy's girl. Had I not, I would have still been hanging with my friends that just discovered heroin. Of the 3 friends, 2 are dead and 1 did 10 years in prison. Almost proposed to a girl who had been cheating on me with a pile of speep that called himself my best friend. This was years ago, and I'm getting married at the end of the month to the love of my life. Life has a way of working itself out. My dad was going through severe depression 10 years ago, and my life was equally speepty for a whole multitude of reasons, and it was rubbing off on me. I spent what felt like half an hour crying on the floor and working up the nerve to pull the trigger. Then when I finally did, the safety was on. I sold my gun the next morning. Wish my dad was able to say the same 3 years later. R.I.P. Undefined. I had a cardiac arrest about 4 years ago. Dropped deadish in the middle of my shift. Found out after I woke up about a week later that the manager who saw me fall was a former lifeguard and knew proper CPR. An ambulance happened to be passing about 2 blocks away. C, probably the best cardio unit in my state, was a 10-minute ambulance ride from where it all happened. Walked out of the hospital about 2 weeks later. Full recovery. Just before starting HS, I got hit by a car doing 35 miles per hour while riding my bike. T-boned. My bike went under the car. I was thrown up, smashed the windshield out with my back, was flipped over the car, and landed a perfect no-hop landing. On my feet. Like a gymnast minus the arms, raised flourish at the end. The entire accident was witnessed by a firefighter who was watching out his window, literally standing right next to his emergency radio, and called for an ambulance. The lady who hit me got out of her car, yelling, "I'm a nurse. I'm a nurse. Lie down." I had no breaks or fractures. Just a bruised ribcage. A literal police car. The police were chasing someone, and I was crossing the road and my dumbass was walking slowly, and the police car nearly grazed me. Look both ways, and take off your headphones when you cross the road, kids. 7. 92 more's a rifle bullet. When I was 15ish I was very depressed, and got very drunk. Found my great-grandfather's WWI captured German rifle. Found some bullets from that time. Loaded it. And put the rifle in my mouth, and pulled the trigger. Thankfully the bullet was not loaded properly / was a dud for being 90 years old at the time. And did not fire. Studying video game development in college. Reading about the standard of living for those people and the horrific abusive practices in the industry made me realize I was totally right to just go with electrical engineering.